السلام عليكم. معكم أستاذة أمجاد الجبدي, and this video is the second part for lesson 2. In part 1, I have explained H2O or water, but in part 2, I'll be explaining macromolecules. As I have explained in the previous video, that macromolecules are organic compounds. And you know that the cell is mostly water, but the remainder of the cell consists of organic compounds. Macromolecules are organic compounds. المركبات العضوية. So what does it mean to have an organic compound? The main thing about organic compounds is that they have carbon. So if they contain carbon, that means they are organic compounds. لازم يكون فيهم carbon. This is the simplest organic compound, methane, CH4. So why carbon? You see, carbon has the ability to form large and complex molecules. يعني عنده قدرة إنه يكون مركبات مرة كبيرة. ليش? Because carbon can form 4 covalent bonds. And if you remember from the previous video, covalent bonds form due to the sharing of electrons. إذا تذكرون كان oxygen and 2 hydrogens, that's H2O. وكان البond, this bond and this bond, covalent bonds. فلما يصير في sharing of electrons, it's called a covalent bond. لأن الكربون عنده القدرة يسوي 4 covalent bonds, it makes it very special, and it gives it the ability to create diverse structures. يعني يقدر يسوي أشكال متنوعة من المركبات. يقدر يتحكم في طول البوليمر, so you can have 2 carbons or you can have 100 carbons. برضو عنده القدرة إنه يسوي double bonds بين كربون وكربون ثاني, so that's also another advantage. وفي برضو شكل ثاني اللي هو branching, ممكن يتفرع, يعني يطلع كربون بعدين يسوي تفرعات ثانية. Also it can form rings. So that's the idea behind carbon, that it has the ability to create a variety of geometric shapes. And that's very important in biological substances and molecules, is to have diverse shapes, because enzymes and proteins and polysaccharides, they all act based on the 3D shape. And that brings me back to the fact that carbon is able to create 3D shapes or 3-dimensional shapes, يعني أشكال ثلاثية الأبعاد. Now that we know why carbon atoms are the lead players in chemistry of life, we can now discuss the types that it makes. So, giant molecules, بالعربي نسميهم الجزيئات الضخمة. الجزيئات الضخمة. And they're called macromolecules. Many of life's molecules, أغلب الجزيئات اللي نستخدمها في الحياة, are actually large. يعني حجمها كبير. That's why we call them macromolecules. Now, macromolecules are not just biological molecules. They can be synthesized molecules like nylon and plastic, but of course in Bio 101 or living organisms ما راح نتكلم عن بلاستيك ونايلون والأشياء المصنعة. Another point that I would like to highlight, that macromolecules exist as polymers, but not all of them, most. يعني مو كل الماكروموليكيولز يكونون polymers. most يعني الأغلب. راح أقول لكم بعدين من اللي بيكون polymer ومن اللي بيكون non-polymers. And I will highlight later which ones are polymers, which ones are not polymers. What is a polymer? Polymers are strings of monomers. So you have to know these 2 words. Polymers are made of monomers. They have in this image a picture of a string. سلسلة من اللؤلؤ. Every pearl represents a monomer. So they just put that for you to appreciate the concept of macromolecules or polymers. I have drawn this table to demonstrate the differences between a monomer and a polymer and a dimer. So monomer, mono, كلمة mono يعني أحادي. So they exist as single units. أحب أسميهم وأنا أشرح خرزات, but they're not really خرزات. But just to help the students imagine, I call them خرزات. So you have single units, monomers. Dimers, di, always means double. So when you have two monomers, a monomer and a monomer joined together, this is called a dimer. Now if you have three or more, then it's called a polymer. And this is so important for you to know, because we'll come back to this again. Now when we're making polymers or breaking polymers, two kinds of reactions occur. لما نصنع البوليمرز ولا نفككهم يكون عندنا نوعين من الرياكشنز أو من التفاعلات. This image shows you how a polymer is being extended. So you've got a short polymer and you want to add this monomer, هذا monomer. So you want to add it, you want to make a link. When you do that, water gets lost. Why? Because you have an H and an OH joining together to create H2O. The loss of H2O is called a dehydration reaction. لما نفقد الماء, this reaction is called a dehydration reaction. Dehydration reactions, they form new bonds. So a dehydration reaction creates this bond right here. So this bond has formed due to the dehydration reaction. But when water is being added again, so the reaction of adding water called hydrolysis, when water is being added, the bond is broken. And that's because you provide the H and the OH and you allow the bond to break. So this bond that you formed, now you can break it once you have added H2O. Okay, now we're going to discuss the biological molecules or the biological macromolecules. Earlier in this video, I have said that macromolecules come in synthetic forms and biological forms, but we will only discuss the biological ones. So there are 4 categories of large biological molecules found in living creatures, يعني في 4 أنواع. And we will discuss every one of them. And they are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Carbohydrate, lipidat, proteinat, أحماض نووية. So let's have a look at the first one, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, they can be simple sugars called monosaccharides, double sugars called disaccharides, or polymers called polysaccharides. And if you remember this image, mono means أحادي. So monosaccharides, mono means simple sugars. Glucose, fructose. Okay? With double sugars, disaccharides اللي هم dimers. لو نشيل الكلمة هذه and put disaccharides. Okay? That means double sugar. So you have one monosaccharide and another monosaccharide joined together by a dehydration reaction. Polymers of sugar, polysaccharides, poly. So if you have 3 monomers or more, then that's a polysaccharide. So you have one monosaccharide, another monosaccharide, a monosaccharide, and so on. I have decided to include this image that I've created a while back for one of my bio classes. And it just helps you remember. So monosaccharides are single monomers, disaccharides are dimers, and polysaccharides are polymers. Let's have a look at monosaccharides. As I've explained, monomers. They are the monomers of carbohydrates. They're the basic units and they are the main fuels for cellular work. يعني هذه خلية ما يدخل فيها disaccharide ولا يدخل فيها polysaccharide، يدخل فيها المونوساكرايدز اللي هم glucose. Examples of monosaccharides: glucose, fructose, galactose. In this image, it's showing us the difference between glucose and fructose. If you look at the chemical formula, 6 carbons and 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens and 12 hydrogens, 6 oxygens and 6 oxygens. So they're identical in terms of the chemical formula, but they are different in terms of the structure. So the atoms are being arranged differently. So they do look different structurally, but not chemically. Chemically, they contain the same amount of atoms. And because of this, glucose and fructose are considered isomers of each other. So isomer إيش معناته؟ معناته إن they have the same formula but different arrangements. And monosaccharides can be in a linear or ring structures, but in water they tend to form rings. Now that we're done with monosaccharides, we're going to talk about disaccharides. Disaccharides are double sugars, as I've explained earlier. This is one glucose and this is another glucose, and they're planning to join together. Once they join together, they create maltose. This is called a dehydration reaction, and that's why it says double sugar constructed from 2 monosaccharides by a dehydration reaction. This is a monosaccharide. This is a monosaccharide. When they join together, they lose H2O, and that is called a dehydration reaction, creating maltose. So this is what has been created, a disaccharide. Sucrose is another example of disaccharides, glucose and a fructose. So this one is a monosaccharide and this one is a monosaccharide. They have joined together, creating a disaccharide called sucrose. Lactose, found in milk, is made up of glucose and galactose. So this is glucose and this is galactose. We have covered monosaccharides, disaccharides, and now we're going to talk about polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are complex carbohydrates, يعني carbohydrate معقدة, complex, and they're made of long chains of sugars. يعني زي ما انتم شايفين هنا جلوكوز مع جلوكوز مع جلوكوز مع جلوكوز مكرر مئات المرات يسوي لي starch or glycogen or cellulose. Starch is used for storage. Glycogen also is used for storage. Cellulose is used as a structural compound. So starch اللي هو النشا، glycogen، هذه البوليساكرايدز تستخدم في التخزين، تخزين الطاقة. لكن cellulose في البناء، بناء النباتات، structural compounds. طيب إيش الفرق بما أن هذا وهذا they're both for storage? What's the difference between starch and glycogen? Starch is found in what? What do you think? It's found in animals or plants? Obviously plants. النشا مو موجود في الحيوانات، موجود في النباتات. فهذا تخزين الطاقة في النباتات. Storage in plants. Glycogen is storage in animals. This image shows you how glycogen granules exist in muscle tissue. Starch in potato. So in the muscle, you'll find glycogen. In the potatoes, you'll find starch. And they both store energy. حبيت أضيف هذه الصورة. برضو أنا سويت هذه الصورة من زمان. I've used this before in one of my classes, and I thought it would help you remember. So you've got just a review of all the carbohydrates. So you have the monosaccharides, glucose, fructose, galactose, and you have the disaccharides, and these are the examples of disaccharides: sucrose, maltose, and lactose. Then you have the polysaccharides, glycogen, starch and cellulose, and I have put images right next to it. In Arabic we've written تخزين يعني storage in animals, and starch is also تخزين storage in plants. Cellulose بناء يعني they're used for structural purposes. حبيت إني أعطيكم هذه الصورة زي review أو summary for all the carbohydrates. So now we're done with carbohydrates. Let's have a look at lipids. Lipids are hydrophobic. إيش يعني hydrophobic؟ يعني كارهة للماء. They have phobia. Phobic. كلمة phobic يعني كارهة للماء. Hydrophilic هذه كلمة hydrophilic يعني محبة للماء. Okay, so lipids are hydrophobic. والكلمة الثانية hydrophilic يعني محبة للماء. So lipids, they don't like water, they hate water. When we say that they don't like water, we mean that they cannot mix with water. لما نقول كارهة للماء يعني ما يختلطون مع الماء. I would like to highlight that lipids are not polymers. يعني ما يسوون polymers زي ما قلنا قبل شوي. And if you remember from the previous slides, from this slide, if you remember, we've said that most of macromolecules are polymers. يعني مو كلهم، أغلبهم. فالlipids أحد الأمثلة اللي ما تنطبق عليها polymers. They are macromolecules بس إنهم مو polymers. يعني ما عندهم monomers. To help you memorize this, I'm going to draw this chart. So lipids are either fats or phospholipids or steroids. So I'm going to talk about each one of them, starting with fats. Fats are triglycerides, meaning that they have a glycerol and 3 fatty acids attached to it. So it's a glycerol and a fatty acid, and fatty acid. I will play this video for you so you can see how they form. So you have, this is the glycerol and these are the fatty acids. So if you see, once they join, water is being lost. I'll repeat that again. This reaction is called a dehydration reaction. Now this side is non-polar يعني كاره للماء, hydrophobic, and this side is hydrophilic. Fats or triglycerides have essential functions in the human body. So they function as a long-term energy storage, يعني يحفظ الطاقة إلى مدى طويل. Also, it helps in cushioning and insulation.
If we look at fat, this is what a free fatty acid is. It looks just like that series of hydrocarbons that I just showed you, which we know has a tremendous amount of energy. We use the same type of chemical bonds to provide fuel and energy for our own bodies. The only exception is on the far end, instead of having a hydrogen atom, we have this carboxyl group, which is COOH. And if we take that free fatty acid and we actually modify that carboxyl group, take away an OH, and we attach it to another molecule called glycerol, we can add 2 more of these fatty acids, and this is called a triglyceride. So it's glycerol with 3 fatty acids attached to it, triglyceride. This is the storage form of fat in plants and animals.
As you have seen from the animation, that triglycerides can be used to store energy in animals and plants. فقال إنه تستخدم الترايغليسرايد لتخزين الطاقة في النباتات والحيوانات. السؤال، أي نوع يكون في النباتات وأي نوع يكون في الحيوانات؟ هنا يجي موضوع الساتوريتد فات والunsaturated fat اللي هو الدهون المشبعة والدهون الغير مشبعة. النبات usually يكون في الدهون الغير مشبعة. الأغلب من النباتات عندهم الدهون الغير مشبعة أو unsaturated fat. But in animals they store their energy in saturated fats اللي هي الدهون المشبعة. What's the real difference between saturated fats and unsaturated fats? The difference is in the fatty acids and not the glycerol. So this is the glycerol and these are the fatty acids 1, 2 and 3. The same thing on this image, that's a glycerol and these are 3 fatty acids. If you look closely, and I'll erase this one so we can zoom in, that one of the fatty acids واحد من الأحماض الدهنية يوجد فيه double bond بين الكربونز. فهنا يكون في الأحماض الدهنية double bond بين الكربون والكربون. so هنا في كربون هنا في كربون، كل زاوية represents a carbon. خلاص بس ما يكتبون الكربونز عشان ما يكون زحمة في الرسمة. but basically every corner represents a carbon. فهنا يكون في double bonds. لو يكون في one double bond يعني بس واحد أو أكثر، ممكن يكون هنا ممكن يكون هنا ممكن يكون هنا، either way خلاص as soon as you see a double bond it's considered unsaturated fat يعني دهون غير مشبعة. But in the saturated fats you don't see any double bonds. Double bonds make the fatty acid bend. So if the fatty acid doesn't have a double bond، لما يكون ما عنده double bond يكون straight، لكن لما يكون عنده double bond تقريبا ينصفط. فهذا الشيء هو اللي يعطي خصائصه الخاصة في ال saturated fat وال unsaturated fat. Unsaturated fat usually they're liquid at room temperature while saturated fats are solid. I would like to also point out something really important. Some students لما يشوفون هذه double bonds اللي بين C وال O اللي في اللي صايرة اللينك بين الفاتي acids والجليسرول، لما يشوفون هذه البوندز يقولون هذا double bond خلاص معنات إنه unsaturated fat. And they get confused looking at that kind of double bond. So you have to make sure that you look for a double bond between 2 carbons. You'll find this table in your book, chapter 3, and it shows the risk of developing a heart disease when a person increases their intake of 4 different kinds of fats. So saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, and trans fats. If they increase it by 5% in all of them except the trans fats 2%, then they will have a risk of developing a heart disease. Now, how do they calculate the relative risk? They calculate the relative risk by comparing the difference of developing a heart disease when a person intakes extra 5% of carbohydrates. يعني بالعربي هذا الجدول يبين نسبة الإصابة بأمراض القلب heart disease إذا أضاف 5% من الدهون في أكله تزيد طبعا نسبة إصابته بالهارت ديزيز. كم تزيد؟ هذا الجدول يقارن بين 4 أنواع من الدهون. فلو زاد هذه الدهون 5%، أو monosaccharides 5%، and so on. trans 2%. فإذا زاد هذه النسب في الأكل، يعني زود على أكله 5% فات، فكم تصير نسبة خطورة الإصابة بأمراض القلب؟ فهذه الأرقام هي النسبة. فهنا في مصطلح اسمه relative risk. إيش يعني relative risk؟ يعني هذا الرقم اللي هنا مقارنة بنسبة الإصابة لو الشخص استبدل الفات بالكربوهيدرات. يعني لو استبدل بدل ما ياخذ 5% فات ياخذ 5% كربوهيدرات. فهذه مقارنة relative risk. هنا يشرحون معنى كلمة relative risk وكيف انهم يحسبون relative risk. In this passage they explain how they calculate relative risk. So, and what relative risk means. يعني ايش معنى هذه الارقام؟ مين فيهم الكويس؟ مين فيهم اللي خطير؟ So, relative risk RR اختصار. So if relative risk equals to 1, or relative risk less than 1, or relative risk higher than 1. يا إنه يساوي 1 ولا أقل من 1 ولا أكبر من 1. إيش معنى كل واحد فيهم؟ To help you understand, I have created two scenarios, A and B. So let's say this person can be in two scenarios. فأنا بسوي هذا المثال عشان تفهمون أسرع الفرق المعاني relative risk. لو هذا الشخص خلينا في وضعين، وضع A ووضع B. A إنه سوى increase للفات 5%. So if this person increases the daily intake of fat by 5%, and scenario B الوضع الثاني إنه يزيد الانتيك حق الكربوهيدراتس، so برضو 5%. وبنشوف الديفرنس بالنسبة للريسك. If the difference of risk between the two, between الوضع الأول ولا الوضع الثاني يساوي، so the relative risk يعني الفرق بين الريسك هذا والريسك هذا. فهنا إذا كان الفرق 1، so if the relative risk is 1 معنات إنه خطورة الإصابة بأمراض القلب لا تختلف. يعني ما في فرق بين الخطورة، زاد 5% فات ولا زاد 5% كربوهيدرات، ما في خطورة. So it means that there is no difference whether this person increases the fat intake by 5% or the carbs by 5%. The risk of developing a heart disease, there is no difference when the relative risk is 1. Now, when the relative risk is less than 1, okay, بنرجع نتخيل this person again, scenario A and B. This is fat and carbs. نفس الشيء، بأعيد نفس القصة، 5% و5%. بس لو طلعت النتيجة بدل ما تطلع 1 طلعت less than 1، يعني أقل. لو قارنا الريسك بينهم طلع أقل من 1. إيش معناته؟ What does it mean? It means that هذا النوع من الدهون أقل خطورة من الكربوهيدرات. يعني this kind of fat has less risk. But if relative risk, if we compare it and then relative risk is more than 1, higher than 1، فإذا كان relative risk أكبر من 1، مثلا 1.5 ولا 1.6، something like that، ولا 2 ولا 3، it means الكلام اللي بكتبه هنا for this scenario. So it means هذا النوع من الدهون أخطر من الكربوهيدرات. فأرجع أعيد، إذا كان 1 معناته ما في فرق، إذا كان أقل من 1 معناته إنه الفات في هذه الحالة أفضل من الكربوهيدرات، أو إذا كان أكبر من 1 معناته إن الفات أخطر من الكربوهيدرات. بستخدم اللون الأحمر وأشوف الأرقام اللي أكبر من 1، يعني أخطر من الكربوهيدرات، اللون الأحمر بيكون خطير. So if you notice that 1.17 1.93 يعني saturated fats و trans fats هم اللي يكونون أكبر من 1. They're higher than more than 1, so they fall under this category. That means they're not good. Now let's look at the ones that are less than 1 يعني أقل من 1. So that's 0.81 0.62. هذه ممتازة. So the monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. In fact the polyunsaturated fats اللي هو هذا أحسن من المونو لأن الرقم أقل. So هنا 0.81 هذا 0.62، فالنسبة الإصابة أقل. أحسن واحد فيهم هذا اللي هو polyunsaturated fat. طيب مين أخطر واحد؟ This one, the trans fat. The trans fat. يعني saturated fat is dangerous too, but trans fat is more dangerous لأنه رقمه the number is higher. If you compare this number to this number, if you compare them, 1.93 is higher. طب السؤال إيش هو الترانس فات؟ What is a trans fat? What is a monounsaturated fat? What is a polyunsaturated fat? You already know the difference between مشبعة وغير مشبعة. You already know the difference between saturated and unsaturated. already انتوا عارفين الفرق، بس إيش في أشياء جديدة الحين اللي هي monounsaturated polyunsaturated. So I'll explain that now. الفرق بينهم إنه في الفاتي acids في الأحماض الدهنية بين الكربون والكربون single bond، لكن في الغير مشبعة موجود double bonds، بس مو في الجليسرول، موجود في الفاتي acid. تحت unsaturated fats في نوعين، هذه لسه ما شرحتها لكم. monounsaturated fats و polyunsaturated. mono and poly من اسمها واضح إنه هنا أحادي وهنا متعدد. إيش يعني؟ يعني الدبل بوند اللي بين two carbons هنا يتكرر مرة واحدة بس، only once, so you only find one double bond. لكن في polyunsaturated you'll find two or more. يعني الدبل بوند بين two carbons مكرر أكثر من مرة، فهنا متعدد وهنا أحادي، هذا الفرق. ف that's the difference between monounsaturated و polyunsaturated. monounsaturated يكونون liquid في room temperature، بس إذا حطيناهم في الثلاجة تجمدوا. But when you refrigerate them they become solid. polyunsaturated they remain liquid in room temperature ولا بالرefrigerator، يعني إن حطيناه بالثلاجة ولا برا الثلاجة يكون liquid. هذا البولي المتعدد. What scientists have done, they have created something called trans fats. اللي هي إيش؟ اللي هي عبارة عن polyunsaturated fats بس مهدرجة أو متحولة. فهذا الشيء يغير من ال characteristics of polyunsaturated fats، فيصير more stable، بيعيش لفترة أطول، ويستخدم في ال foods and chips and cookies and كل هذه الأشياء اللي فيها دهون وتكون تنحفظ على مدى طويل، أو الزيوت القلي frying oils and so on. So they use this to make food taste better. So what are trans fats؟ وش يسووا بالضبط؟ في نوعين، في cis وفي trans بالكيمستري. كلمة cis يعني إنه two hydrogens على نفس الجهة، لكن ترانس إنه هيدروجين على جهة والهيدروجين الثاني opposite على الجهة الثانية. So هذا الفرق. And these are more dangerous.